So, hi, Elan. Thank you so much for meeting with me. It was really cool to bump into you again at the HR event the other day. Thanks for being here.
How's it, Nix? It's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, very cool to be on your podcast.
Yeah, so when we were chatting, you said that Sleek Geek, who I know of because we've actually had a chat before, thinking about asking you guys to come in and get our team nice and fit. And you said that there's an interesting backstory, so I think that's a really cool place to dive in. But before we get there, I want to ask you about the News 24. You were the general manager of News 24.
Yeah, it feels like lots of lifetimes ago. That's part of the backstory, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So
In
maybe
that
take us
I
from
come,
there. I also worked at Media
yeah.
24 for a while, so I know
Oh,
some
wow.
people
Okay.
around there. Yeah. I mean, it's a very,
That's
very different environment, like proper corporate, right?
exactly. Yeah. So basically, like, that is my background. I don't have a health and fitness background. And I spent about 12 years working in digital media. That was my first career. Um, so as you mentioned, I was general manager at News 24 for a few years, did quite a few internet jobs at NASPAS. And then my last gig, I was the group head of digital at the Times at, well, what was called Avusa then. It no longer exists, Avusa, but it was, basically Times Media Group, Sunday Times, iNet Bridge, New Metro, Exclusive Books, all those brands fell under me. I was the group head of digital there. And so basically, what happened was in my corporate career, I was so focused on my career and I wasn't focused on health at all. And I spent all those years literally like living on takeaways, being inactive, hardly sleeping. Like I was, chain smoking a box and a half a day. I was just your archetypal corporate workaholic. And that's all I was focused on, to the detriment of my health, my relationships, my mental health, everything. And so I had this moment where I decided to make change in my own life, and I started to enjoy getting healthy, and I started to enjoy being healthy.
Can I
And
just
I thought,
ask
hang on,
something there? Was there, when you say
yeah.
there was a moment, did you get sick? Like, what was the sort of defining moment of, okay,
No,
I need to
so
stop this?
yeah, so you're right. Like often when people have that kind of a moment in their life, it's normally a health scare or something like that. For me, it actually, funny enough, it came out of vanity, I guess, where I was, hey, whatever's going to get you going. So where I was literally, we were planning, my girlfriend and I at the time were planning to go to Zanzibar on like one of those resort holidays. And when you are unhealthy and overweight and all those kind of things, you tend to ignore your body. You don't like admire it and look at it. And I've got tattoos that I'd forgotten that I even had. And I was sitting there thinking, geez, we're about 10 weeks out from this holiday, and I feel embarrassed because I'm going to spend like 10 days in board shorts. I feel embarrassed, like, just walk around like this. What can I do? And because I'm a competitive guy at the time on
Competitive.
Twitter,
You
it was,
broke up there. Did you say you're
yeah,
quite competitive? Okay.
yeah, I'm a competitive guy. And like on Twitter at the time, it was mainly just the people working in the digital industry. It hadn't gone mainstream yet. So Twitter was still in its infancy. And most of the digital media tech kind of people were the cool kids, kind of the early adopters. And I just kind of said to my friends, hey, let's do a weight loss challenge, because, previously I'd seen that Body for Life challenge, which was a New York Times bestseller. And like, I got the idea, like, let's just put some money in a kitty and, the winner can take that money. So we all, I got like 10 of my friends off Twitter and we all put 500 Rand in the kitty. And yeah, and I had 6 weeks till I was going to Zanzibar. So I made it a 6-week challenge. And I didn't win the challenge, but I lost like about 8 or 9 kilograms in that 6 weeks. And I previously, yeah, I'd never really had much success with dieting, and I didn't really keep the ball rolling. But I thought, hey, hang on a second. While I'm in Zanzibar, why don't I just try and go to the gym in the resort every day? Why don't I try and like not eat the carbs and stick to protein and veg? And so I kept it rolling. And then when I came back from my holiday, everyone was like, hey, we got to do another challenge. And so I thought, okay, well, we created a Facebook group to support one another for the first one. And because at that time, the community was referring to itself as geeks. Like,
Mhm.
you know, because there was Geek Cricket and there was Geek Retreat and there was Geek this and there was Geek that. So I just thought, you know, I just thought, oh, let's call it Sleek Geek as like this Facebook group. And in those days, Facebook groups weren't really a thing. Now they're obviously very common. And so we just started helping each other, talking to each other, sharing strategies, like trying to learn about what, you know, what works, what doesn't work.
It's cool,
And
hey?
then it
It's
just
like one of the
grew.
first communities, like online weight loss communities, and you kind of founded it. You know, like
Absolutely.
this thing is so common now, but back then that
Yeah.
was using a platform like Twitter for something that it probably hadn't really been used for before, and that's really clever.
Yeah. Yeah. And now we kind of like, you know, it's saturated and there's way more competition. But yeah, we were pioneers in that, and Facebook algorithms favored us a lot in the early days compared to now.
Mhm.
You know, we would grow very quickly in those days compared to now.
Now they want you to
And
pay.
we, you know, we had our heyday. I mean, just remember, you know, we pioneered the group thing because what some people don't realize is on Facebook you've got pages and you've got groups. Most businesses tend to go for a page. A page is more kind of like we'll talk to you. It's almost like a broadcast. You know, it's not a conversation. Whereas groups are much more discussion, a
Mhm.
conversation. And Sleek Geek's about a community. It's not a fandom. So it was never about people being fans of me and I kind of like I'm an influencer to them. It's more a case of we try and connect people in our community to one another. And you know, so it feels like a real community. So yeah, I mean, now here I am. I'm an executive in a listed company with all these responsibilities, and my little Facebook group's growing. And all of a sudden, there's a couple of hundred people in there. And then I thought, you know, that movie Pay It Forward.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it. So
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just
I loved
thinking, I
it.
was standing in the shower one day and I was like, geez, you know, if we've inspired like 100 people, why can't we inspire 1,000 or 100,000?
Ooh.
So I just said, you know what? I want to inspire 100,000 people to live a healthier lifestyle. And promptly resigned from my corporate career. Everyone thought I was a lunatic.
Mhm.
Um, Took my savings, which was like a year's worth of living expenses, and decided that this was now going to be like a passion project, sabbatical. You know, hey, if in a year's time I have to go back to my career, no problem.
Would you
Yeah,
just dig in a little bit in terms of what can somebody expect, either with a B2B solution or whatever other offerings you have? Just break it
yeah,
down for us so that so Sleek,
sure. I mean,
what exactly is it? And then if they were to come to your website, what would they see and what would the options be?
yeah, I mean, I think rather than talking about products or services, rather let's just like maybe look at the philosophy, because the philosophy kind of underpins everything that we do.
Great.
So first of all, before we get into that, on a community level, we call ourselves the Sleek Geek Health Revolution, because you know we're not a diet, we're not a program, we're a community of people who are unhappy with the fact that in society the norm is to be unhealthy.
Mm.
Um, we are unhappy with the fact that if you try and be healthy, you know you get labeled like obsessive or like a health freak, or you know we're unhappy with the fact that with environmental design, people are constantly surrounded by choices that are not going to help them. So, you know, Sleek Geek, first and foremost, it's a health revolution. When it comes to the product philosophy, we are very focused on health being a habit. So I think that what we've noticed over the last 10 years is if you look at the paradigm, the average person, when they want to get fitter or healthier, thinks, oh, I've got to go on a diet or find a diet, or I've got to find some, you know, training plan, and I've got to be able to follow those religiously. And that's going to require discipline and willpower. And that's the formula. And, you know, add into that any supplements I can buy, or you know, quick fixes, that kind of thing. That's the general kind of formula. Whereas we think that if you think about most fit and healthy people that you know, that make it look effortless, they've generally just got a set of habits that they repeat,
Discipline,
you
yeah.
know, day in, day out consistently.
Unrelentless discipline, if I think of the
Yeah, but
people
it's
behind it.
basic things.
Yeah.
But it's not so much discipline. It's more like habitual.
Mm.
In a
Non-negotiable,
sense,
non-negotiables is like the
yeah.
way that they've explained it to me when I've like questioned, how do you do that?
But also the way that, yeah, exactly, the way they've just made it. You know, I've often said, like, you know, how do you test if something's a habit? Like for me, something's a habit when it feels weird not to do it. So
Mhm.
let's say you're not in the gym routine. When you go to the gym, it feels weird to go to the gym.
Mhm.
But when you're in a gym routine and you stop going, it feels weird not to go.
Not to go.
And for
Mhm.
me, that's always the test of like habitualizing something. And things become more automated and less effort when you start to habitualize them. So if you look at the work of James Clear, which a lot of people will be familiar with, he wrote the book Atomic Habits.
Mhm.
Highly recommend it. And then
Heard
a
the
little bit
name of
less
the book.
mainstream.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what he's done is he kind of has made building habits and how to do that a bit more accessible. He's written a book which has given it to people in an accessible way, without complex theories, etc. But for the geeks out there around habits, there's BJ Fogg, who also wrote a great book called Tiny Habits,
Mhm.
and he is the head of the Stanford lab around behavior design. And he's been basically studying behavior for the last 20 years.
Wow.
Same thing, small incremental changes. So James Clear's key mantra, which people can like hold on to, is like, just try and get 1% better every day.
Mm.
Small incremental change. The fact that, progress is more important than perfection. And it's just that having an always something approach rather than an all or nothing approach is very valuable. So a lot of people have a very all or nothing approach to health and fitness. Like I'm either 100% gung-ho going for it,
Mhm.
or I'm not doing anything. Those seem to be their two options. And this will probably resonate with a lot of people listening.
Mm.
Whereas all the small little things add up. When you go and have a hamburger, whether you had just half of the bun versus, or whether you had just half the chips or a smaller chip, all those things add up. Whether you went for a 10-minute walk, whereas most people will be like, oh, if I can't go to the gym for an hour a day for 5 days a week, or if I can't do this, then I'm not going to do anything. So basically we have a habit-based approach to health. And then what that means is, what does that look like in practicality, is you can break down health into lots of bite-sized little actions. If you think about sleep habits, mindset habits, a sleep habit could be setting a bedtime alarm. You set an alarm that basically reminds you to start your bedtime routine, and make sure that you get into the sack and you have lights out at a certain time. That's like just one sleep habit, for example. A nutrition habit could be simply eating more slowly. Like eating more slowly has been proven to help people with portion control without having to count calories and all those kind of things, naturally, just to
Be
get it
conscious.
more in touch with your satiety. So all these little things are small things that people can do. And I think once they start to realize, hey, hang on, all these things kind of add up, then they start to realize, okay, it's not about having just eating steamed broccoli and fish for the next rest of my
Rest
life.
of your life, yeah.
So exactly. So basically all these little habits is what we've broken it down into, like this habit library. And that can then be played out in a whole different range of ways through our coaching program, even like, a pack of cards, select like a healthy habit to start practicing via an app, all sorts of outcomes for that through 21-day challenges. And you can then start to make collections around specific things. Like, let's say you have a problem with blood pressure, so then you start, there's some habits that you could work on that might help you with that condition. So you can go right from the macro level of nutrition, exercise, sleep, and mindset, and you can start then focus on things. And the great thing about this is it's essentially a model for change. So we try and teach people the principles of how to habitualize those actions. And we've got a whole lot of theory around that, which I won't go into those now. But I think one key thing that people might enjoy as a takeaway is, we always say you are what you repeatedly do. So many people can appreciate or believe that repetition builds habits, but repetition alone doesn't build habits. Emotion is the very important aspect to building habits.
Okay, I'm with you. Okay, so I didn't realize that it was much more of a kind of holistic approach to whatever it is that somebody wants to change for their betterment and well-being. It's like
Of
you
course.
pick what the habits are that you're not 100% happy with, and we make incremental changes together in this community, and we get
Yep.
you there. And I love it because I actually studied health coaching about 8 years ago now. And you
Yep.
reminded me of crowding out, this theory of crowding out. Do you know it? Have you heard that
Yeah.
one?
No, I don't, but I'm interested to hear.
I mean, you're basically talking about it, but it's just calling it one thing. So this is in
Mm,
particular with food, but I mean, you could also consider it with habits. It's like, okay, I
mm,
love tea. I'm a big tea
mhm,
drinker, and
mhm,
but dairy doesn't really agree with me anymore. I'm getting on in the years, and you know, your
mhm, mhm,
composition, your body changes. So, but I've discovered mint tea, and I love it.
mm.
And it took me a long time to like, oh, but I want tea, you know? And I was like, yeah, but you know how good you feel when you drink the peppermint tea. So that's an example of crowding out. So I still
Mhm,
have a cup of tea when I wake up in the morning, normal tea, but the rest
mhm.
of the day I drink herbal teas and I love it. It's fine. It's hydrating. I feel great. So that's a good
Yeah,
example of crowding out. And you can do it with anything really. You find something that
that
gives you
sounds good.
almost as much satisfaction, just as much, sometimes even more, but it can still be difficult to break the habit, even when there's so much
Mm,
payoff, because it's all, like you say, those emotional associations. You know, normal tea with milk, it's comforting, it's family, it's, you know, all of those things. To then be like, well, I'll have my mint tea, even though I prefer it, can still be quite difficult. But so habits are difficult to change. So it's awesome that that's like the foundation of your philosophy, if I understand.
yeah, I mean, habits are difficult to change, and that's why, that's the thing, is habits are a double-edged sword, because as much as you can create good habits, you can create bad habits, and break good habits, and break bad habits, and absolutely, it becomes so one of the key principles there is try and make the things that are going to benefit you more convenient and more attractive and easier to do, and try and make the things that are going to keep you further away from your goals less attractive
Mhm.
and less convenient. Yes, willpower is a muscle, and you can build it, and it is part of the mix, absolutely. But I think a lot of people, they think that if they can't open that fridge 100 times and ignore that chocolate cake that's sitting there,
But
that
there's
they
something
don't
wrong
have
with it.
willpower.
Yeah.
The thing is, even the most elite people on earth would eventually, like, you stick it in my face.
Yeah, and
And so
also
that's
if
why
there's nothing
environment
else,
design.
yeah, if there's no
Yeah.
alternative that's there, like make it easier for yourself. Have something at
If
hand
you
that is filling, sustainable, nourishing, and you know, good for you.
Exactly. If you walk into your kitchen and on the kitchen counter there's a bowl of fruit, versus if you walk into your kitchen and on the kitchen counter there's a jar of rusks, you ultimately are governing what's going to happen in that environment.
Okay, let's dive a little bit
Yeah,
into the food side of things. I mean, one of the
sure,
cool things about the course that I did is that they took us through everything. Everything
sure.
from vegan to no dairy to no carbs to like any diet, any fad diet you can think of, we studied it along the way to see
Mhm,
like all the different angles of things. And I'm actually doing a zero carb the thing with my parents at the moment because I've got
okay.
crazy the beginnings potentially of like osteoporosis and arthritis and a lot of inflammation, and they're
Mhm,
struggling with stuff like that too, and they did a bunch of research, so we're trying it out, and I must say I actually feel quite amazing. It is a lot of adjustment. I'm not saying I'll do it
mhm.
forever, don't know if it's sustainable, but curious to know where you come from with the whole food thing. Is it very much about the individual, or do you have like a meal plan, or like how do you educate the people who come into your community?
Yeah. So I'd start by saying we're agnostic,
Oh, nice.
um, because there's a lot of religion and zealotry around nutrition. And unfortunately, everyone's got their research and their science, and some of it is not
I
all of it's created
agree.
equal.
Yeah.
And I also think that a lot of people, you know, just it's not just because someone did well in something, it's not necessarily what they did, which was the actual cause. So, for example, if I'm eating junk the whole time and I start eating like a vegetarian, then the chances are I'm going to feel much better. I'm going to be much healthier because I was eating junk. But
Yes,
if I
sure.
just eaten a more
Low
healthy whole
benchmark.
food diet,
Yeah.
same thing might have happened. But so back to when I say we're agnostic, we believe more in a principle approach than a strategic approach to nutrition. And I'll tell you what that means. So the principles of nutrition are different to strategies of nutrition. So, banting, veganism, intermittent fasting, all those things are strategies. The principle of nutrition, for example, is you have to have a reasonable amount of protein. Okay. So you've got to have a reasonable amount of protein if you plant-based, or, no matter what dietary style you choose to adopt. And so we work with people across the spectrum without being too prescriptive. My general prescription is do something that you can see yourself doing for years ahead. Everyone is different in a sense that, a lot of these things work towards certain ends. So intermittent fasting definitely helps you reduce your calories. Ultimately, if you want to lose weight, a lot of these things have mechanisms that are going to help you reduce your caloric intake. So I think go with things that suit your personality. So for example, I've got a friend who he loves intermittent fasting because he very happily works the workday, not wanting to think or consider food and be bothered by that. And, he has like really good meal and calories in the evening, and that suits him to the T, and he enjoys that. Whereas another person might be thinking about food all day, and it might be like a torment. So, I've got another friend who loves banting because he's like loves meat. He doesn't really mind not having carbs. But, if you're someone who loves carbs, then going down that road to me is like, unless it's intended to be a short-term intervention, I think it's always going to backfire. So ultimately, I always say to people, experiment. And because the thing is there isn't any one truth. Like anyone who says that they found the truth to nutrition or whatever, I'm like, like
I agree
ultimately,
with you. I love you that you called it like religious, and
yeah,
that's what you see. You get people who get so upset, fanatical.
of course, it's
Yeah.
become an identity. I mean, how many people isn't it strange that people put onto their Instagram bio like their nutritional stance? Like
Mm,
it's become part of people's identity.
mm,
I'm a keto person, I'm a vegan person, whatever. But the
mm.
point is like, look for the similarities. So if we were sensible, rather than trying to find all the differences, the similarities for me is everyone should be eating more whole foods. Okay. Everyone can benefit by eating a wider range and more
Less
vegetables
processed,
and
yeah,
good
or
fiber.
not processed.
Exactly. Everyone can benefit by having less refined sugar. You know,
Drinking more water.
exactly. All of these basic truths that like nobody will disagree about. Like to me, those are the things that are important. A lot of people, when it comes to nutrition and exercise, they do this thing called like majoring in the minors, where they really obsess about the tiniest of details that probably won't make much difference.
Hmm.
It's like mowing the lawn when your house is on fire. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like you're
When
not eating enough whole food and vegetables, but you're obsessing about your eating window. Was it like 45 minutes or
mm,
60 minutes? Like,
mm,
but it's because people think that there's some little thing that they don't know about that they might be getting wrong. And that's why, so I'm not saying this with any judgment. I'm just
mhm,
saying that, like, I think a lot of people are missing the big picture.
mhm.
And, at the end of the day, so that's why, our philosophy is around the principles of nutrition. And there are many different ways. For me, the evidence is that you can see someone who gets really healthy with a vegan lifestyle. You can see someone who gets really healthy with, a balanced Mediterranean lifestyle. You can,
Mhm.
so the evidence to me is that there is no one truth. I think there are certain things like they have shown, for certain groups, like for diabetics, for example, then some of these lower carb lifestyles have been proven to be more beneficial.
Mhm.
And some people just feel better on certain
Mhm.
things.
Isn't
You
that the
know,
key though? Isn't that the key? Like that you got to do what's right for you. So one of the other terms that you're reminding me of from my health coaching course was bio-individuality. So it's the
yeah,
idea that maybe a part of this education that you're doing, and what I hear from you is like educating people to get back into contact with themselves, like back into, you mentioned satiation, like slowing down, breathing, chewing slowly, and actually being present to the experience of eating as a start.
Sure.
And then from there you start to be able to hear your body again, and your body does tell you what it needs. Unfortunately, there can be a lot of noise because there's a lot of sort of sugar addiction and carb addiction and those sorts of things that you've got to cut through. Meat addiction as well, like nobody talks about that, but the way that people talk about meat, sometimes you're like, geez, it's just a different type of food. So yeah,
but it's a real minefield. I mean, I'm not in the best shape that I've been in at the moment, and that's because I've battled over the last 10 years. I've battled binge eating on and off, where when I'm really in a tough emotional state, my go-to for pleasure is food. And I've spent the last 10 years trying to rewrite those scripts, but it's an ongoing battle, and sometimes I get it much more right than other times. But it's just to say that, like, people out there who are wanting to get fit and healthy, it's not always that simple. And sometimes you need to get other help. Sometimes you need to actually go and have therapy, or start looking at other solutions when the roots of the problem are deeper.
That's actually why I stopped health coaching, because I was taught, and it was a great course. I mean, I loved every minute of it, but I realized very quickly that, you can eat as much broccoli as you like. And if the relationship's broken, it's not going to get fixed by eating whole foods, it's whatever it is that's going on in your life, it's got to be. And so my client base, they'd come to me for a conversation around food, and it had turned into something else very quickly. And I realized that I didn't have the training to go into those areas, and that it became very, very much about counseling and coaching on an emotional level, instead of it being about food. So interesting that. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, emotionally, I think it's very brave, and it makes a lot of sense that you would get into this kind of a field, because I think we're always drawn towards the spaces where we find our own healing. And by helping other people, we help ourselves, right? To understand. And I imagine you bring a tremendous amount of empathy because of your own experiences. But I see here we're running out of time. So maybe I know it's just flown. So maybe as a way to end off, what do you think your sort of 3 key takeaways should be for anybody who's watched this far? Like, where would you want them to where should they launch off from? What can they take away from this?
Okay, so I would say first thing you can take away is that you don't have to have an all or nothing approach to health, and that you can make a lot of progress in your life by just doing small incremental changes. The next takeaway I would say is there is no one specific diet to rule them all. And ultimately, it is about a journey of finding out what you enjoy most. And ultimately, if you want to lose weight, you've just got to find a way to reduce your consumption, and to get a little bit more active. So that's
simple as that,
as basic as it gets. And then the third thing I would say is, what would the third takeaway be?
I loved what you said about 1% better every day.
Exactly. I mean, every time you do something, every time you drink a glass of wine, you become 1% more wine drinker. And I got nothing against wine at all. Every time you go to the gym, you become 1% more gym goer. So in James Clear's model that he has, he basically says if you get 1% better every day, you will be 38 times better over the period of 365 days. And I think the thing about change is, it's that whole melting ice block analogy, where, when you put an ice block into a glass in front of you, you don't initially see any change happening, but there is change happening because the temperature is raising, and ultimately then when it gets to like 0 degrees Celsius and it passes that point, you start to see it melting. And I think a lot of people, when they start on a health journey, they are too impatient and they expect it just to be a straight line. And it's really often just about sticking with it. And that's why I say, when it comes to sticking with it, maybe you got to lower your expectations of, rather try and stick with it for 3 months at like 70%, then try and be 100%. And then, because nobody does that. I mean, if you want to do something new in your life, let's say you want to learn how to play piano, nobody expects to be able to go from not being able to play the piano until next week
To the
playing
best piano
beautifully.
instructor in the world. Yeah.
So why do people go from, I've been eating terribly for 10 years and being inactive, so next week I'm going to start this plan. Now all of a sudden I'm going to be eating like an athlete and training like an athlete,
And I'll be
and
fine.
if I
It'll be
can't do
great.
that by Thursday, then this wasn't for me.
Or I wasn't
I don't
disciplined
know.
enough.
Exactly. So why do we have this approach? Anything you want to learn new in life, that's going to be a learning curve. At first you're going to make mistakes. People don't apply that to their health.
I love
And
that. I love it. I love the
practice makes
say
health's a
say
practice.
it. Say it.
No,
Practice.
well, I mean, health makes permanent. So
Practice makes
basically,
permanent.
yeah. So health's a practice. Like, they call yoga a practice. You do the same movements over and over for years. And so think about health as a practice. So when you screw up, just think, oh, okay, so now I'll get better at, ordering off a menu. And, if you mess up a weekend, just think, okay, well, that weekend,
Maybe
at
you
the end of
should
the day, what
mess up
people
on the weekends. Let yourself mess up
exactly.
on weekends. Just take it easy. It doesn't have to be gluttony. It could just be like you have nicer things at the weekend or the fun thing.
Well, that's the whole thing, Nix, is everyone gets to define what their version of health is. Like, I don't know if you know Ramit Sethi, but he's got like that, I'll teach you how to be rich. So he defines, like, you define your own rich life.
Okay.
Everyone's got their own rich life in a sense that, I might want to spend a lot on travel, but, for you, that might be wasteful. You'd rather spend a lot of money on clothes.
Oh, yes, I did watch him. And he's the one who drives
Yeah,
the
I
big
think he's
old
on
car.
Net.
And yeah.
Yeah. So I think he did a Netflix documentary. But so what I'm saying is everyone, like, if you think about it, like, everyone's definition of health is their own. Like, you've got, like, on one end of the spectrum, you've got these vegan yogis who will say that I'm living my healthiest life. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got this protein chugging bodybuilder who in their mind are living their healthiest life. So everyone needs to decide, like, you don't have to have ripped up 6-pack abs. You just got to decide, like, do you want to just be a little bit more energetic to play with your kids? Do you want to just be, everyone decides. So if you want to have your wine and your champagne, and everything's a trade-off in life. Like, when you say yes to one thing, you say no to another thing. And everyone must determine where their trade-offs are according to what they need to be happy. And there's no definition of what health is, universally. It's up to every person to decide those parameters for themselves.
Lovely. And that's, I guess, what you guide them to. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Very, very cool chatting with you. So fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you.
It
Thanks
went
for the
quickly, but it
work
was
that
great.
Yeah, it flew, absolutely. But I just want to say, you're doing good work in the world.
Thank you.
It's appreciated, having this conversation, hearing, like, getting people healthier, inspiring them to live a healthier, more energized and inspired life is a really good thing. So thank you.
Thanks, Nix, and thanks for having me, and good luck with your next ventures.
Thank you so much.
All right.